Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant project. I got a little bit of a different video for you today, still based on pageants. And by the way, I've heard from a few of you that you watch these videos, particularly the ones where I'm walking around. Now, normally I am in favor of high production values. Hopefully you've seen that from the interviews I do. When I do a lot of these videos, I like to multitask. And so when I'm out for my walk, I like to record these videos at the same time, just to be a bit more intelligent with how I'm using my time. So if you ever wonder why you see me walking around, that's why. I also like going for walks. I find it very peaceful. Gets me out of the house, away from the computer screen, because sometimes I spend far too much time in front of the screen for pageants and other things. It's one of those situations where you're doing work and so you're in front of the screen and then you want to relax. So what do? You turn on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and that's in front of the screen again. And then before you know it, you spent the entire day in front of a screen, which is not good. It's one of the challenges of not only working for yourself, but working from home. I think a lot of people over romanticize that, and there are certain benefits to it for sure, but it's not all gravy. So I'm out and about, and I want to talk to you today about pageant partners, boyfriends, husbands, for no other reason than it seems to have been coming across my radar, popping up on my mind more than a few times recently. And here's the thing: if you are really dedicated to your pageant and you are competitive, you really want to win. If you are unhappy, okay, I hope this is obvious, but if you are unhappy in your relationship, you're unhappy, period. And it doesn't matter how well you're doing in your pageant prep, how well you're doing in your career, how well anything else. If you're unhappy in your relationship, you're going to be unhappy, period. Now, yes, you can fake it. Yes, you can grit your teeth and get through it. But wouldn't it be better not to? I mean, you tell me. I mean, I hope you haven't been in this situation, but I know a few people have. And let's say you have a full-time job or you're a full-time student. And on top of that, you're prepping for your pageant. And so very often, your typical Monday to Friday can look like waking up super early, 5:30, 6 in the morning, going to the gym, then having your commute to work, working 9 to 5, and then having your commute back. Maybe you got some appearances or coaching sessions after work, and then you got to go to sleep because you're buggered, and you got to get to sleep in time to wake up on the Tuesday and repeat the cycle. And so that's your Monday to Friday. And then by the time it comes to the weekend, you're either using the weekend to, let's say, rest up, or you're using the weekend to do more pageant stuff, more pageant appearances and things like that. If your relationship is grinding your gears at the same time behind the scenes, this introduces an element of friction that you really don't need and is really not going to help you. And look, frankly, if and when you win, you want the people closest to you to be happy for you. We want to share our the highlights of our lives with people who hopefully know us and care for us and love us. So we don't want to do it alone. But what seems to be happening behind the scenes, I'm not going to tell you that it's all the guy's fault or that it's all the women's fault. I don't think that's a useful conversation. I think that's silly. I think we all need to take our own responsibility. But what I will say, if you're the pageant partner listening to this, or your pageant girlfriend has sent you this video or this podcast episode, what I will say, and this is from my own personal experience, and this is frankly how I got started in pageantry, it is a crazy world. A lot of it will not make sense. Some of it still doesn't make sense to me to this day, after having been in the industry for over, 10 years. But what I will say, I hope this makes sense to you, is that if you care for your girl, truly care for her, then if she is crazy passionate about pageantry, you're going to do your part and you're going to hopefully support her no matter what, even if you don't understand it. Now, I've seen a couple of perfect examples of this. I remember when I was over in Tennessee last year for Miss Volunteer America, and I met someone over there who had been following my work, and it was really interesting because she was there with her mum, and you could tell they were both very invested in pageants and they loved the glamming up, and they were in their element. And it just happened. I happened to ask, "Oh, how'd you guys get here?" And she said, "Oh, my dad brought us." So I asked, "Okay, where's your dad?" "Oh, he's in the car. He's sitting in the car park. I think he was listening to the radio or listening to sports or something, because he had tried coming to a pageant once or twice and he really just had ended up sitting or standing in the corner, not knowing what to say, not knowing what to do, being a bit awkward. So he would just go and have his time in the car whilst the mother and daughter were doing their thing at the pageant." Now, I think that's great, right? In that situation, if you're the dad and your daughter is crazy about pageants, maybe your wife is crazy about pageants, maybe she's a former pageant girl, and you have no idea why all these girls are so excited, but you know that she's your daughter, or if it was your partner, you know she's your partner, you know she's crazy excited about this thing, and there has to be a reason for it, even if you don't get it. So you're going to do whatever it takes to support them. And the litmus test really is they feel supported, by the way. So if I go to your daughter or I go to your partner and I ask them, and they're being honest, and I say, "Do you feel supported by your partner or by your parents?" Hopefully they're saying yes, okay? If you want to go a step further. Now, by the way, there is such a thing as becoming too involved, okay? There are quite a few girls who would not take kindly to you, let's say, telling them what they should wear or about their makeup, what color their hair should be, etc., etc. That's on a per case basis, but just know that it can go too far and you can get too involved, because they may just say, these are Australian birds, beg your pardon, they may say, and they may have good reason for this, they might say, "Well, what on earth do you know about makeup or about fashion sense?" Right? I would lump myself in that boat too, by the way. I'm not going to go around and tell people what they should be wearing or pretend that I know everything about fashion. I do say I know what I like, but that's about it. But if you do want to get interested, get involved, or at least understand more about it, the easiest solution, obviously, is go along to the pageant or go along to one of her appearances. So she's doing a charity appearance or she's emceeing a gala or something like that. Make an effort. And when I say make an effort, it's one thing if your girl or your daughter has to drag you kicking and screaming and you keep moaning about it and whinging about it, and then at the end of the day you say, "Well, when didn't I?" And yes, you did, but you made it very clear that you didn't want to be there. And so in my head, this probably doesn't count, okay? Because it was like you being held at gunpoint and you were forced there against your will. So I'm going to make the giant assumption that you actually do care about your partner. What I would say is be a bit proactive. Now, this idea permeates through everything else I'm about to say. Be proactive. So go and ask your daughter or your partner and say, "Hey, I've seen you working on this dress or doing this speeding, or you spend 3 nights a week practicing your speech or practicing your interview. When's the pageant? When's your next event? Can I come along with you? Would you like me to get dressed up and go along with you?" Right? And we can make a date out of it. We can make a night out of it. We can make an evening out of it. That's a huge difference between you having to be dragged off the couch, kicking and screaming, and then you wonder why your girl says she doesn't feel very supported, even though you went, right? The other thing that I want you to give consideration to in terms of being proactive, if you know that your partner or your daughter or your wife is running herself ragged doing all this pageant stuff, I want you, hopefully you know your partner or your daughter well enough to know what an ideal night off would be, or an ideal 1 hour or 2 hours off would be. So she's feeling tired, she's feeling stressed, and let's say you don't understand it. You don't really have to understand it though. If you can see that she's stressed or that she's tired, and I will guarantee you that moment, if it hasn't come already, it's going to be coming in your near future. Just say, hey, we haven't had a chance. And by the way, if she hasn't had time probably to spend on the relationship, then this will be good for you too. Say, hey, we haven't spent a lot of time together. Do you want to go and, grab something to eat? We can catch up. Maybe you can make it a bit romantic. Go back to the first time, the place where you had your first date. Maybe it's a local diner. You guys in America are crazy about Waffle House and whatnot. It doesn't have to be a big fancy thing. But the point is you're showing that that this is important to her. And you're going to do, again, your best to support her, even if you don't really get it. You don't really understand all the nuances. And this bears saying, again, you're being proactive about it. You're not waiting for her to try and drag you off the couch, kicking and screaming, when she has a million other things on her mind already. And I will say, there's a huge difference when I work with a pageant girl or pageant woman of any age, and they have the backing of their partner, of their husband, or frankly, if I'm working with a younger one, whether they had the backing of their parents or not. Now, it could be, as I said, you could just be the father who takes her daughter to all her crazy appearances, and you sit in the car because you don't get it. But hey, that's you doing you. That's fine. You are showing that you support her. And I would say you want to communicate and say, hey, look, I'm going to be out here. If you need me, let me know. I just don't want to get in your way because this is your world, honey, not mine, and I don't understand it. And I think that's fine. I think a little bit of communication goes a long way. But be proactive. If this is something that your partner, your daughter cares about, and you care for them, I would hope it goes without saying that you want to be sharing a little bit of care or a little bit of interest in this crazy world. Now, what I will say, ladies, from the other perspective, this is not one of those cases where you just make out that all men are the same, that they don't care, that they're stupid, and that somehow the few men that are in pageantry, I get this comment quite a lot, like myself, and they say, oh, yeah, but you don't count, Adrian. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I do count, because last time I checked, I am a guy, right? Here's the thing. It goes both ways. So if I'm talking to your partners or your parents and saying, hey, you might not get this crazy world, but if you care about them, you're going to show your support. Guess what? When your man comes back, or your dad comes back, or your partner comes back, and all he wants to do after a long day of work is just sit in front of the couch, watch his game, or play his video game, whatever it is to de-stress, you don't then get to lecture him as to how that's such a waste of time and he should be doing, I don't know, the house cleaning or the laundry. Now, I get it. I don't want to get in trouble with you guys. So let me be clear. I'm not saying that if you're knee deep in old underwear and he's never washed a dish in his life, that you should sit there and take it, everything in balance. But what I'm saying is you have to understand that there are some things that he's passionate about too. And as much as you might think that what he's passionate about is stupid compared to what you're passionate about, just ask yourself, if it was reverse and he said the reason he doesn't support you in pageants is because the whole thing is stupid, you might feel a kind of way about that, right? So the fact is, look, if you're in a loving relationship, there's differences and there's similarities. You probably have some similarities, otherwise you wouldn't be in a long-term relationship with one another. This whole thing about opposites attract, I think opposites can create chemistry, but if you're completely opposite with someone in every single way, you're just not going to be great partners. But there are some similarities, hopefully, between the two of you, and there are some differences. Whatever you do, don't try and change your partner, okay? I'll tell you, that doesn't work. And little known fact, but I actually have worked in relationship counseling, not as a permanent or a long-term career, but sometimes doing what I do in terms of life coaching. The problem really is in the relationship. And as I said, if you're not happy in your relationship, you're not happy. And I remember one time I was working with someone on their business, and it ended up really being a problem with her husband, because her husband wasn't pulling his weight in the relationship. But I'm not a fan of saying that all men just are stupid, don't get it, or that all men are the problem, or that men are the problem. And I do see this sometimes. I have a friend, and she posts up dating life stuff all the time, and calls out men on her social media and comments and things like that. And I'm like, okay, look, you do you, but if you, as she says, she wants to find a relationship, find a long-term partner, but she keeps saying, she's going through a different relationship every month, and her moral of the story seems to be that all men are the problem. And I'm like, that's possible, but first off, who picked those men in the first place? And number two, what's the common denominator between the last 10 relationships you've been in? It's you, right? So maybe I'm not saying it's your fault, but I'm saying maybe there's something that you need to look at within yourself, and at the very least ask yourself, well, why am I attracted to those men in the first place who've turned out to be complete, losers or scumbags or whatever it is? But life goes both ways. So you want them to be interested, and hopefully they are interested. You don't have to have a discussion with them and say, hey, you should be interested in what I do, because that discussion won't go well. I mean, I will say, if they're genuinely not interested in anything you do, is there much of a relationship? I really don't know. But a lot of men like to come back from a day's work and go into their man cave. And if they've had a stressful day at work, you let them have their thing, and you show some interest, or at least show your support, even if you don't get it. Now, this is a horrible cliche, right? But I don't know, if he's come home and he's playing his game, or he's playing a game or watching his game. This sounds horrific, and I don't mean it like this. But could you say, hey, do you want a beer? Maybe you have some beers in the fridge, right? Or maybe you just sit on the couch with him. And you don't insist on talking about your day, right? You just let him de-stress. This is where men and women really are different. Okay, I truly believe they're equal, but I also equally believe they're very, very different. And men have their own way of doing things. As you most likely understand, they're not much for talking. They very often communicate in monosyllabic grunts. When guys get together, they like to do stuff as a general rule. They like to get together and, throw the ball around, or go for a run, or go for a bike ride together. Whereas women are very happy to be verbal. They have that verbal intelligence, and so they will sit down and they'll talk things out. Men are different. I don't need to tell you that. I'm sure you know that. But it goes both ways. And so we expect our partners, our husbands, our fathers to be interested in what we're doing. And then it does go both ways as well. The final thing I want to say is look, not every relationship is forever. I know this from my own experience. And I think when you're a bit younger and naive, although this is not the strict purview of only the young and the naive, and I see some people, the young ones, like teenagers, and they get into a relationship and they're calling them love of my life. And I'm like, you guys have been together for 3 months, but okay. If during your pageant journey, you're noticing that your partner not only is not supportive, but that they seem to be controlling, that's a different discussion. If you feel, because what happens, and we discussed this in the podcast just this week in terms of our most important life lessons, and Peyton, I think, said something very important, which is the self-growth and what she's learned about herself. There is a possibility that your partner fell in love with a previous version of yourself that simply no longer exists, and you don't want to exist anymore. If that's the case, there's 2 very simple choices. 1, you grow together, or 2, you grow apart, and you should end it. Hopefully, again, proactively, because you can tell you're now 2 different people, your lives are diverging, and rather than waiting for a giant argument, you get intelligent about it and say, hey, look, I've noticed that, I've been through XYZ through pageants, and I've learned this about myself and what I want for my life goals, my career, etc. And I've noticed that, you and I haven't been talking as much recently, and, let's hash this out and see if we can make it work. I know that might sound a little bit robotic to you, but I honestly think that having that sort of a conversation is better than having one that is triggered because you got on the other person's or they got on your very last nerve and you snapped. And, God forbid it happens at an actual pageant event. As I said, this is why I wanted to talk about it, because it's so emotionally draining. If your relationship isn't firing on all cylinders, you have a minimal chance of winning a pageant with that going on in the background. And so you want it, if you're going to have the relationship, knowing how to build. And I'm not saying you're going to be in love every moment of every day. Okay, I'm not that naive, but having someone on your team, I think that's what I'm saying. And what you may find is that through pageants, you learn a lot about yourself. And this is what Peyton said again. It's like she learned what she wanted, but also what she didn't want. That can be a pretty scary place, or a confronting place, I should say, because you may realize that the two of you simply aren't compatible anymore. That doesn't make you right and him wrong. It doesn't make him right and you wrong. But if you're not compatible, you're not compatible. And it really comes down to that simple question of, well, you're going to grow together or you're going to grow apart. And look, if that's the case, you have a conversation to have. That might be difficult, but I promise you, you will feel much better for having had it than trying to ignore it and hoping it just goes away. Because I can assure you it doesn't. It's exactly like any sort of chronic health scare or any serious health scare you have. You're better off confronting it. I say go after it aggressively. I'm not saying going after each other aggressively and yelling at each other. What I'm saying is, let's talk this out now. Okay, let's not wait for it. Let's not just pretend it doesn't happen. Let's not bury our head in the sand. Same with a health scare. Get to the doctor. What test can I do? Own it. Educate yourself about it. Have questions about it. Get in front of it. Do not bury your head in the sand. I've known a few, not personally, but YouTubers, male YouTubers, who passed away from bowel cancer. And, not to bring down the tone, but one of the first signs of that is bloody stool. And if that's happening to you, don't ignore it. Don't hope that it goes away. It's serious. Find out about it. So in the same way, in your relationship, if there's a discussion that needs to be had and you're on the lead up to a pageant and you're putting all of your heart and effort and soul, your blood, sweat and tears into it, you will know. It's not a difficult question. If I ask you, is this person the right person for you? Because you're going through an emotional journey through pageants, and that's when you will find out if that person is really there to support you, if they're really going to be on your team. When things are going well, things are going well. I really feel, and I've said this, you don't know how solid your relationship is until you've had your first argument and your first fight, your big one. And then you want to see how you guys work it out, if you work it out, right? And so I know this is a tangent, but many of you are a couple of months or 3 months, 4 months out from competing in a pageant. And there's a reason that sometimes professional athletes will swear off having any sort of serious relationships in the lead up to, let's say, a big competition or the Olympic Games. I'm not saying that has to be the case, but if things are not going well, it is a huge distraction. And that's the other thing. When you're busy or your partner is busy, you may not have a lot of time for one another, but understand that that's not personal. I know it might feel personal, but there are different phases where you can't be together as much as you would like. Communication is the key, okay? Being proactive, as I said before. So getting ahead of it and saying, well, I know that we haven't gotten to see each other much recently and I'm just super busy with this pageant. Well, he might be having the same discussion with you. Maybe he's got to be working overtime in his career, or he's pursuing a sports career or something like that. And maybe he can't spend as much time with you as you'd like, or maybe both. Rather than making it about the other person and making it out that they're a terrible person, that they're not prioritizing you and they're just an awful human being, which is not going to go well, believe me, because there's some things once you stay in a relationship, you can't take them back. it doesn't matter where you say, I didn't mean it, I just said it in the heat of the moment. No, you said it, and once you said it, it's out there. You might wish you could take it back, but I feel that there are some things that you really can't. So understand that sometimes you won't be able to spend as much time together as you would like. Communicate about it. And if it's really meant to be, as cliche as it sounds, it's meant to be. And you'll figure it out. And in fact, better than that, you'll be stronger together because you know you can get through the hard times, as I said. So, just some thoughts. Relationships and pageants have been coming up on my mind quite recently, and with some of the people that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I just wanted to chat about it with you this week, and hopefully you found some of this helpful. If you're single and happy to, and you're happy to be single, I don't blame you. Okay, it does keep things simpler, but I think one of the great joys of life is love. And so, whether you swear that you never want to be in a relationship again or not, I would say you probably do. You're just too afraid to admit it because you've gotten burnt too badly before. But again, it does behoove me to remind you, I'm not a believer that it's always the guy's fault. I'm not a believer that it's always a woman's fault. It's not about fault, it's about responsibility. And it's a journey. Pageantry is an emotional journey. You're going to find out a lot about yourself. And so there is a chance that, you may turn into a different person, and that person, who you were, they were growing together, but now you're growing apart. So let me know your thoughts. Take care of yourselves. I'll speak to you next week.